this new definition of wealth. So I had just come from the music business. I thought wealthy was you just meant you had a lot of money. And his definition was no, you have enough money coming in each month to cover your bills. And that money that's coming in isn't necessarily tied directly to your efforts.
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found in the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, Calls on Call Extraordinary Answering Service, as well as the Bold Business Book. And today we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Matt Theriault, owner of Epic Real Estate. Matt, I apologize. You told me I was going to mess that name up. I hope I didn't mess it up terribly.
No, you got pretty close. You got closer than most. But
nice.
Thanks for having me, James.
I appreciate that. So, Matt, today we're talking real estate. So let's just start out with what is Epic Real Estate?
Well, Epic Real Estate is a company that kind of a two-headed company where we show people how to invest in real estate and those people that want to be a little bit more hands-on. And then we have another portion of it that my wife runs where she actually does the investing for them. So she does all the heavy lifting. So some people want to be hands-on, some people want to be hands-off, but pretty much our client wants real estate so they can retire early.
Nice.
Yeah.
And is this, when you say two-pronged, I guess, as far as that goes, how long have you been doing it?
Let's see, I've been investing myself almost 20 years now, 19 years or so. Been teaching for about 15.
Okay. So let me think, 20 years. So you got in right before the market crash of 08.
Correct. There's not too many of us that are still around.
All right. So great timing, right?
Yeah, well, in hindsight, I think it was, right? When it was happening.
I would think so.
Yeah,
Depending upon where you were leveraged, I guess, in 08.
Yeah, I mean, it also depended on your strategy. You know, if you were the people that got really hurt then were the people that were doing the fix and flips and had 5, 6, 7 projects going on at once. And then they had borrowed all this money to do those projects. And when the market flipped, now they were stuck and they couldn't sell them. That was a lot of people. And that was most people that got hurt. And then, but that wasn't my strategy. I was a buy and hold type investor. So
right on. So tell me about that. Is it residential, commercial?
Yeah, almost exclusively single families. I've dabbled into multifamily housing, but I just came back to single family because it's simple, it's easy.
Now, I have heard, as far as single family goes, I was listening to another podcast, not as good as this one, but another podcast.
Sure. Not even.
And essentially, there was a debate going between multifamily versus single family. And the single family guy had a very good argument, I thought. And he basically said you will always be able to sell a single family house. There will never be a time when there's not a family looking to live somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to both for sure. And I don't hold it against the multifamily people because I think they do have a good argument. It just depends on how involved you want to be. And I think kind of what he said, like there's typically a much easier exit strategy available for the single family person. Most of the time you don't get to benefit from market appreciation and upswings in multifamily as you do single family. But then on the other side, when it comes to operations, if you can really fine tune and dial in your operations on a multifamily, you can essentially force appreciation. So there's good to both. I don't think there's a perfect investment strategy or a perfect asset class out there. Right. Everything has its fleas and everything has its, its good sides too.
Sure. Let's talk about that forced appreciation because I think I understand, but just for myself as well as the listeners, is the idea that you buy a place, build it up so you can raise the rents and therefore you can sell the property for more.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, because, it really has to go with how homes are valued or how real estate is valued. So single family homes are pretty much valued based on what a similar house recently sold for, right? So if this house sold for that, then my house is pretty close to theirs, then my house is probably worth something similar. When it comes to multifamily, it's not as easy to find comparables. Like there's just not a bunch of 40-unit buildings all sitting on a row in the same city that you can compare them against. And typically those are purchased as investment vehicles. So it's really the performance of those properties have a greater impact on the value than it does like a single family house. So yes, you can raise rents, but you can also reduce costs, right? I mean, you can go through it and find different ways to streamline, whether it's through energy or through its new service providers, or there's all different ways to upgrades, updates, stuff like that.
Okay. So 20 odd years ago when you got started, or let's go even further, 22, 23 years, what
Mm-hmm.
was the trigger, the turning point for you to get into the real estate game?
Mm. Yeah, I was in the music business for 15, 16 years.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
had a small little hip hop label with major label distribution, and did really well until, this thing called Napster came along and people stopped buying music, right? And people just started downloading it for free. And so, at the time that that was happening, I mean, no one couldn't even imagined it, right?
Right.
6 months. I mean, 6 months of selling no compact discs, no CDs. That'll put you out of business really, really fast in that
Wow.
business.
All
And
right.
in a whirlwind. I mean, in 6 months, I was out of business, and the wife didn't appreciate that, so she took off because she needed a guy with a job and income, and then filed bankruptcy. So it was a big giant whirlwind. And at that time, I was 34 years old, and I thought I had life made, and I had no idea what happened. Like in 6 months, my life was just completely different, and I had no clue. In hindsight, it's crystal clear. But at the time, I didn't know like this digital download thing was such a big deal, but
Right.
but it really was. I mean,
Eh,
iTunes wasn't even started yet.
No, no, I still remember Napster and man, I don't remember the names of the other players. There's Napster went away. I feel like one would go away, five would take their place.
Yeah, I think there's like LimeWire was one.
LimeWire.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
LimeWire. Then there's this thing called BitTorrent type
Yep.
thing where you could download all this stuff,
Yeah.
and so then they're trying to sell the downloads, and now they don't even sell the downloads. Now you just get all the music for free for $4 a month or whatever it is.
Right.
So
Interesting. So tell me, do you mind if we dig into the whole record label thing a little bit?
sure, no, I love talking about it.
So, how do you get into being a person in a record label or owning a record label?
That was a very interesting story. I was born and raised in Irvine, California, Newport Beach in Irvine, California, which is very much probably the center of the universe for yuppies at the time. I don't even know if people remember what that phrase is, but that's really what it was. And I was, I went to an all white high school, very, conservative and just very vanilla, sterile. It was a brand new school. Like I think I was the first graduating class there to go 4 years. When a brand new suburban development. I mean, everything was just brand new and crystal clean and pure, and just it was just
Stepford
like
Wives there.
very sterile. Yeah. And I was in the musical theater, and we were doing this performance of Flashdance. And at the grand finale required break dancers. And so our choir teacher, quote unquote, went to the other side of the track to try and recruit some break dancers. And to no luck, but she did find one guy that came over, and he taught me and the only other guy in this musical theater class. And so we did the grand finale. And so in like 3 months, we figured out how to break dance and all that kind of stuff. But that was such a pivotal moment because I fell in love with that culture. This was 1983, 84.
Oh wow. So breakdancing was huge back then.
Oh, I mean, but it was right at the beginning. It was in its infancy as far as being a national awareness. And he brought his radio and the music that he played. I was like, I'd never heard anything like that ever before in my life, and it just captured me. I think I was what, 16, 15, 16 years old,
All right.
and I fell in love with the whole thing, and I would drive all over from city to city just trying to find out what this music was and how I could buy some. I didn't even know how to ask for it. Like like I'd walk into the store and go boom, cat boom, boom, cat boom, boom. Like I'd try and sound it out for the music store clerk, and a lot of them just looked at me crazy. And but eventually got into it, and I became a disc jockey, and then I started making my own music, and taking my little drum machine to my gigs and mixing records with the drum machine, and then eventually started making my own records. And I'd put records in the trunk of my car, and I would drive from record store to record store. Um, you ever been to Southern California?
I have San
Yeah.
Diego.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my
Yeah. So
favorite places in the world. Yeah.
yep, I lived in Orange County, and I would take off and I'd drive up to LA, then I'd drive up to San Francisco, then I'd make a right turn, go inland all through San Bernardino and Riverside, all the way down to San Diego and all the way back up. I had this tour of about 50 different music stores in that giant circle, and it would take me the whole week to do that. And I just put my music on consignment in each one of those stores. And then by the time I finished that loop, it was time to head off again to go and collect for what had sold and replenish whatever new release we had. So I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. Literally sold music out of the trunk of my car, and uh,
Huh.
and then I got the attention of EMI Music, and they said, "Hey, we see all the noise you're making down there in Southern California. We'd like to distribute your music globally." And they gave me this deal, and I think I was 22, 23 years old, and got a check for $100,000. And I was like, for records I hadn't even made yet. And I was like, wow. So that kind of kicked off the whole music business, and then it went up from there.
Nice. So, did you have other artists besides you that were making music that you were distributing?
Yeah, one thing I kind of pioneered was these dance music compilations. And so people would, there was some different labels. I think Thump Records was one that was doing it really, really well. And they would go out and they would find this big name disc jockey, a dance disc jockey. And then they would go out to all these small little independent labels and license dance music. Then the DJ would mix that live and they'd put it out on a CD. So it was like a legal mixed tape.
Huh.
And so those got really big, and every big dance disc jockey had that. So I took that concept and took it to hip hop. So I found out all the hip hop DJs and went out and licensed all this independent hip hop music, and kind of just made the DJ was the star of the record album. And so that's what we did. And those sold, 40, 50, 60,000 units every single time. And we'd release one of those once a month. And it was just me and three of my buddies. That was a great, great living. Cost us 75 cents to make a CD. The wholesale price was $8. And it was just like, wow, I'm getting paid to do this, which was just totally remarkable. So that's how we started. That was our big success. And I had a couple artists and I had some one-offs. I mean, Eminem, we had a single with Eminem before anyone knew who he was. The brand new heavies. I don't know if you remember them. We had some,
Yeah, I remember the name. I couldn't
yeah.
tell you a song.
Most Def, we had a single with them.
Oh, nice.
Jurassic 5. And so we had some big, big names. I mean, they're big now. They weren't then. And so, I mean, I look back, there's certainly some missed opportunities there. But Eminem, it was funny, the Eminem story that people asked me about. He sounded so different than anything else out there at the time that I didn't like it. I was like, "Ew, I don't like this kind of rap." And I was like, damn, missed that one. But 2 years
Can't
later,
all be home runs, right?
yeah, like 3 years later, he was a household name. But
Dang. Tell me just really quick, without I don't need to dwell on this or anything, but just the curiosity is blowing my mind here.
mhm,
You got a bunch of records, but you have to go to a record manufacturer or stamper or whatever they call them
mhm,
to get these records pumped out, and you had to front the money for that, I imagine.
mhm. Yeah,
So
there
how
was
big of a deal was that?
yeah, they were small amounts, right? So I had to get 300, 400 records pressed at a time. And so that would cost me like, I don't know, $2.75 for the vinyl, because that's what I initially started selling. So that's what maybe $1,000, right? And then I'd go sell it and I'd get about $1.50 markup on it. So I'd come back with, 3,500 bucks or 2,500 bucks, something like that, and press some more and just kind of kept that rotation going. But when I got that first order from EMI, they had asked me for, hey, can you send us 500? And I was like, I didn't have 500, right? And so and then they said, well, we need 500 of that, 500 of that, 500 of that, 500 of that. And that was such a big giant paradigm shift, because I'm selling 5 or 10 at a time per store, right? And all of a sudden they want 500 of each one of my releases, and was just like, well, I don't have the money to press that. So to your point, and that's where this idea of, hey, we could just advance you the money, that'd be no problem. And I'm like, wow, you would do that? Because this was just a totally different world to me, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking very much like you. I mean, I was operating very much based around what the context of your question is. Like, how do you come up with all the money to do that? Well, I didn't. I just did very little at a time. I'd press a little, sell a little, press a little, sell a little.
Now I got another question as far as records go.
Mhm.
So records in Southern California, I picture getting wavy and melty in the
Mm.
car. So
Hmm.
is that an issue?
Yeah, I had all kinds of strategies for keeping the records flat.
All
So
right.
first thing, like my radar was on fire for any parking space with shade. So it was like, and that still is stuck with me today. Here we are 30 years later. I still like my eyes look for the shade in a parking lot. But I had some, what do you call it? The kind of like these metallic blankets that I'd put over my records in the trunk of the car, and then I'd pack them really tight so they'd stay straight. And so
Okay.
packed them really tight that way. So
All right. So
good
it's a
question.
system.
'Cause, no one's ever asked me about that, but I had a system for it.
Well, I've had a couple records go bad when I
Mhm.
learned that the sun through a windshield is not a good place for a record to be.
No, no, I had
So
to
you
pack
just like, I'll
really
just be
tight.
gone for a couple minutes, right? And then you
Yep.
come back like, oh,
Yeah.
what happened
Don't leave them
there?
in the windshield. That was lesson number one for sure.
No. Interesting. So you go through all that, and then Napster comes around. What
Hmm.
was the moment where you're just like, oh, this is not good, and we gotta find something else? Was it when the wife left, or was it previous to that?
Um, it was it happened before the wife left because she left after the income stopped.
No.
So we were still making a little bit of income there at the very, very end, but just nominal. And I'd pressed like the last two records I'd pressed, I was like, I'd noticed a slowdown in the sales. So, and I had a formula for these records that I was making, so it was very predictable of what it was going to be. And then when it saw sales started to slow down, like those last two releases, I was like, okay, let me kick this up a notch and really focus on these and really make something special. And I made two records that I were just like one of the more prouder moments of my life of what I pressed, and they sold almost nothing. That was the clue. I was like, wait a minute. I went out and I got some big names on it. I spent extra on promotion. I had the placement in all the music stores. I had center page um, advertisements and all the biggest industry magazines and everything, and nothing. And previously, that would have been like a home run almost every single time if I did that. And so with that was like the pivotal moment. I was like, okay, I got to find something else to do.
All
So I
right.
started producing for other people and not trying to make my money off of the records so much. So became a producer more than a record label owner. And so
To
I
the
think,
point that you would be contracted out to their or somebody else's
yeah, I was
studio?
just a gun for hire. Like, for example, I did the last thing I worked on was with In Vogue,
Oh,
and
nice.
this is kind of when they broke up and they were coming back together. So I found a new member. I brought the new member. I got to produce a couple records for them, and that did okay. And I think while I was doing that, I saw in the newspaper that EMI had sold their vinyl plant. And I was like, there's the writing on the wall. And when they sold their vinyl plant, that means they're not going to make vinyl anymore. And that's what I was doing. That was a big portion. I mean, that's a big portion of the hip hop culture. It was vinyl at the time.
Hmm.
And I was like, uh-oh, that's a clue. And so that was the big moment where I was like, okay, I got to figure out something else to do.
All right. And did you do that into, I suppose at the time, that's Napster time, that's CDs. So you went through the records and then into cassettes and then into CDs.
Yeah, so we did compact disc for the consumer, but we always had to make vinyl versions of things because our big promoter were underground hip hop DJs.
Oh.
Because we weren't like in the gangster rap type stuff, which was so popular. NWA was so big. We were more of like that independent, underground, earthy type stuff. Like think Most Def if you're a hip hop fan, like
Hmm.
that. And so he was one of my favorite MCs of all time at the time and still is today. But we were like that. So really, our whole means of promoting was through nightclubs and then late night radio.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So just so I understand this, was the music that you were creating or helping to get out there, did that end up on Napster? Or people were just consuming so much volume of music that there wasn't room for, or they didn't care
Oh no,
about
it
other
ended up
stuff?
on Napster
It did.
because remember Napster was a sharing
Yep.
mechanism.
Hmm.
So if they uploaded our music onto their computer and they were a Napster member, then our music was on Napster.
Just like that. Poof.
Yeah.
All right.
It wasn't like an intentional upload. It's just if it was on your computer and it was on Napster.
Yeah. Interesting. That is
Yeah.
crazy. So then how do you shift from producing, being the hired gun, into getting into real estate?
Yeah, so that kind of dried up. It was interesting. My very first project I ever produced that I got paid for in music, I think I was 17 years old, 17 or 18. I produced a song for Vanilla Ice.
Oh,
That
funny.
was It was on his follow-up album though. I missed the whole wave of what made him all famous. But I thought, hey, I got two songs on Vanilla Ice's next album. It's gonna be amazing. I have made it. And that album never came out, and we never heard really from Vanilla Ice again. But
It
so
never
I think
came
I got
out.
say again.
It never came out at all.
It never even came out. Uh-uh.
Wow.
Yep. And so because really Vanilla Ice never came out again. You know, he had the ride with he was like the one hit wonder guy. And so I remember I got paid $1,000 for each one of those. So I had made $2,000. I think I was 17 years old, and I was like, wow, $2,000 like was so much money at the time for doing something that I would have done for free. And in my very last project that I did with In Vogue, I got paid $1,000. So I went through the
Oh,
whole circle, right? And I came all the way back right down at 34 years old, and I got $1,000 for that. There was no budget. They were trying to resurrect the group and everything, and so, but I was happy to do it. But I was just kind of like, all right, I got to find something else to do. And at that time, you know, Sony Music had laid off 10,000 people. Universal Music had laid off 10,000. And then like 6 months later, Sony Music laid off another 10,000 people. So I was like, wow, if the big boys aren't making it, if Napster is having that big of an impact on the big guys, then who am I to think that I can survive this? And it was like the internet and everything. It was just like I just didn't know anything about anything other than how to make music. That was my only skill. So, but I had to eat, had to provide for myself. So I went out and started looking for a job. I just went out into the real world and submitting applications and found out very quickly that I wasn't qualified for anything per my documentation and my certificates and my credentials. There wasn't a whole lot of demand for an unemployed entertainment entrepreneur. So I did all kinds of things. I sold cars, I sold insurance. I went through a number of different multi-level marketing businesses and everything.
the Amways of the world.
Yeah, went through all of that because I went through a temp service. I remember I was signed up to be a temp, and I remember the little girl, I don't know, she was probably 24, 25 years old, and she was administering the test. So I had to take the typing test to see how many words per minute. And I remember when I got done with the test, she was like, "Oh, wow, you're really a fast typer. I think we can keep you busy." And I was just like, "Oh my God." It was so patronizing. And she was like so proud of me on how fast I typed. And I was like, "Oh my God, I got to find something else to do." But I ended up bagging groceries for about 6 months while I was just kind of figured out. And fortunately, the grocery store was the whole grocery union was in strike. So they were paying like $22 an hour. And
Dang, for bagging groceries, that's all right.
yeah, yeah. I was like, okay, I can handle this for a second. And I don't know, 6 months went by, the strike hadn't ended. And I was like, you know, it doesn't look like anyone's coming to save me. And if I don't figure out something to do, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. And the grocery store manager, I was 34 years old at the time. The grocery store manager was 34. He'd been there forever. And he said, you know what? I'm only 2 years away from taking down my pension. So at 36, he would have been there 20 years. So he's going to be able to pull 70% of his salary for the rest of his life via
Wow.
his
Good
pension.
for him.
Totally. But he said, look what else I've done along the way. And he pulled out this little photo album. Do you remember photo albums, James?
Oh
The,
yeah.
yeah, you know photo albums. You look like you're close to my age.
Yeah.
And he said he showed me some pictures of some apartment buildings he had. He said, look, I've been able to amass these along the way. Had a couple of them in Los Angeles. And the passive income from those apartment buildings were actually going to exceed his pension. And he said these words to me, and it changed my life forever. And I've said it a million times since. But he said, you know, Matt, real estate, it's the final frontier for average guys like you and me to make some real money.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah. And I was just like, wow, there's three really pivotal moments in that, or three operative words there. Like the final frontier. Well, gosh, I've been sitting here searching for 6, 7 months, haven't found anything. And he said, for average guys, he said, for the average person, I was like, I was feeling far below average at that moment in my life. So, like, who am I to aspire to be above that? And he said, to make real money. And I was like, yes, I really miss my real money from the music business. I need to make some real money. And so that's kind of where I just chose real estate for those one comments. I didn't know if he was telling me the truth or not. In hindsight, he was. But at the time, I was like, I got nothing else better to go on. So that's the direction I'm going. So that's how it turned into real estate.
That is awesome. So tell me, how did you get started? You're bagging groceries,
Mhm.
making your 20 some bucks an hour. Now you got to
Yeah.
go from there to investing.
Well, here's what happened is the strike finally ended, and one of the head bosses, one of the regional managers, had come to me and says, "You know, Matt, I'm hearing a lot of great things about you. We'd love to keep you. You're fantastic. We really appreciate the work and the service you provided here. But if you're going to continue working with us, you have to go union, and that means you have to start at the bottom. And so everyone starts at $7 an hour.
Oh, there's a punch in the gut.
And I couldn't. I wasn't living off of $22 an hour. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So that night, going home very miserable and depressed, I took a bottle of wine home and got on the line and just started searching everything real estate because that I'd had that conversation just a couple weeks before then with the grocery store manager and found an estranged aunt that I hadn't talked to in probably 15 years. And she was the number one real estate agent just 2 cities over from where I was. And
Wow.
yeah,
Stars are starting to align.
totally. And I was done with my bottle of wine, so I was filled with liquid courage and just fired off the email to her. And in the morning, she responded. We had lunch that day, and within 24 hours, I was in real estate agent school. So I thought that's where I was supposed to start. And I think that's where a lot of people think if you're getting into real estate, you got to get your license or whatever. And that's just kind of what I thought. I didn't really have any guidance. And, it took me about 3 or 4 years to realize, you know what? If real estate is where all the money's at, I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk. I want to be an investor because had a couple clients that were, and I was able to compare, on the closing statements, their profits with my commissions. And I was like, you know what? I want the profits. I want what they're getting. I want to do what they're doing. And so that was a big pivotal moment where I had declared to never represent another person on their sale or purchase of real estate. I was only going to represent myself. And so I made a
Very
big,
cool.
giant investment in my real estate investing education.
Huh.
And, you know, that's where it started.
Was your aunt an investor as well, or she was just agent?
Sort of. She's kind of like your real estate agent from Central Casting. Like she was just, and she was really good at what she did, and she was the queen of the office, and and she had bought real estate along the way, but very much in a traditional way. She'd put 20% down, she'd go to a bank, she'd get a loan, and she'd just hold on to it. And she owned like, I don't know, she owned 8, 9 houses in the same tract that she lived in. So yeah, she invested in that regard, but I don't think she considered herself a real estate investor. She considered herself a real estate agent.
Gotcha. Okay. So you transitioned to investor,
Yeah.
and there had to be, I imagine, a point when you break off from being the real estate agent and you
Mhm.
really start honing your skills as an investor. Tell me a little
True.
bit about that.
Yeah, people think they hear real estate agent and real estate investor, and they think there's probably a lot of similarities. And there's really not. They're very, very different. I mean, they all both deal in real estate, and that's about where it ends. As a real estate agent, you're a service provider. You're representing somebody else. As an investor, it's your job. You're representing yourself, and it's your job to make money. That's the mission. And so those are just have two completely different mindsets. And when you get into the world of real estate investing, you start to see, wow, there's other ways to acquire property. And there's all these different types of property. It's not just saving up a down payment, going to a bank, jumping through all their hoops and going that route as most people use to buy their own primary residence. But I really was attracted to what we call creative acquisitions, where you could take properties over with the existing financing already in place, where you could negotiate seller financing, and then we started looking for off-market properties, not the stuff that's online with the multiple listing service or what you see on Zillow, right? That's where the public plays. We play off-market. And so we just kind of go to the source. And I learned how to do all of that. And there's this little book, I don't know if you ever heard of it, called Rich Dad Poor Dad. Have you heard of this book?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's a
So
that seems to be a
yeah,
commonly mentioned book
like
when
who
you're
has
interviewing people in the real estate world.
for sure. And entrepreneurship really altogether encompassed. But there were two things I got from that book at that time. And one was this concept of passive income. You know, I speak English. I can take the word passive and income, put it together, and kind of figure out what it means. But to have it as an intention, something to pursue, that was just a wild and crazy idea for me. Like that just was not, just didn't even exist in my universe. And so there was that I got from that book. And then he had this whole definition of this new definition of wealth. So I had just come from the music business. I thought wealthy was you just meant you had a lot of money. And his definition was no, you have enough money coming in each month to cover your bills. And that money that's coming in isn't necessarily tied directly to your efforts. And so he had this new formula, this rat race escape formula. So it was to get your passive income to exceed your monthly expenses. And having just kind of thinking I was on top of the world and had the rug pulled out from under me, I never wanted to go back to that. And so this whole idea, it really resonated with me. Like, if say someone pulled the rug out from under me in real estate, at least I'd have this passive income thing that would keep paying. I wouldn't have to go bag groceries again, God forbid. So that changed my whole world, changed my whole focus, my whole direction. And within 3.5 years, I got to a point where the passive income from my real estate did exceed my expenses. And at that point, I wasn't I wasn't wealthy, right, by normal standards, what most people consider, but I was free. I didn't have to work. And having experienced both, a lot of money in the bank, but still having to produce records every single month, and then not having a lot of money in the bank, but not having to get out of bed if I didn't want to. I kind of preferred that, right? I kind of preferred the freedom over the wealth. And so yeah, that kind of kicked me down this whole education path because I just thought at that time I would by the time I did that, I was thinking it's 39, 40 years old. I was like, wow, where would I be if I didn't go through all of this? Like I would have never learned about this. I would have had never had a reason to read a book like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I've never, it just wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And I just thought, wow, like what if they swapped out Catcher in the Rye in high school and gave you that book instead?
Oh man.
Right? I mean,
Right.
how different life could have been. And so I just started thinking about that. Gosh, I would have never ever known about this because I didn't come from a wealthy family. It was all a bunch of civil servants, police officers, and fire department, and aerospace engineers, stuff like that. Very conservative family, very traditional values, and they're going to work where they're working for 40 years. They're going to max out their 401ks and their pensions, and that's just their life. That's the family I came from. So no one was teaching me about passive income. No one was teaching me about real estate investing. And it was just about that time where my wife and my new wife, got pregnant. And I was just like, you know what? I want to pass this along to my son. Maybe I can start something new start a new branch on the family tree, so to speak. And that's where I just started documenting everything and then selling it and teaching it. And so, he's got a perfect blueprint to follow. He's 13 now. And so that's how the whole teaching thing came into my
Nice.
world. Hmm.
Tell me, let's dig into some of those pieces. The creative, oh my gosh, what did you call it? Creative
Oh, creative
financing?
acquisitions. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that or some of the options that you worked with in that regard.
Sure. So most people, when they go to buy a house, they will go to a bank to see how much they qualify for, and they'll have to see how much they put down, and they'll do the numbers, and then the bank will tell them this is how much you can afford, and now you take that little letter, this pre-qualification letter, and you go out shopping for a house. That's how most people do it. I think it's 93% of all houses are transacted in that manner. So I deal in the 7% that aren't. So what we do is we go out and we look for people that are experiencing some sort of distress, whether it's financial distress or personal distress or their property itself is in distress. And for one reason or another, going the traditional route with a real estate agent is not a good solution for that person. And so they'll reach out and they'll call one of us based on our marketing materials because we offer fast cash. We can close quickly and no, you don't have to fix up the house. You don't have to do anything. There's no fees or anything like that. And so we do our own marketing, same way that pretty much real estate agents do, but we kind of target our marketing a little bit more to people in these types of situations. And they call us. And so we might say, you know what? If you want fast cash, it's going to be kind of this investor price. It's going to be low because we got to fix it up and then we're probably going to resell it. And that's how we make our money. We understand if we're not the right buyer for you, we don't fit a lot of times. Or what we could do is, the market might allow us to push the price up a little bit more if you were willing to take some money now and the rest later. So how
Oh,
much how much do you actually need right now? And so that's kind of the two options. You get the fast low cash offer so they can get their money really quick and move on, or they can get pretty close to market value if they're willing to accept payments over time. And so that is, and it looks exactly like every other real estate transaction, but instead of me making payments to the bank, I'm making payments to the seller.
So can we, just for full understanding,
Mhm.
put those in numbers in a hypothetical situation? Say the house is worth $400,000.
Yep.
Let's just start
Mhm.
with option one, where you are buying them out for lower than market value to get
Mhm.
them cash and move on.
Yep. Traditionally, typically that number for the fast cash is going to be somewhere between 60 and 75% of the after repair value.
Okay.
Most of the properties we see are not even close to being ready to go onto the market. So there's a lot
Gotcha.
of
They're a little
repairs
beat up.
work that has to be done. So
Okay.
it's usually somewhere between there. And that's kind of a broad range, but it's there, and it's just 100% dependent on the condition of the property, how much work needs to be done. The other way we could do it is maybe we could give you 80, 85, even 90% in some regards, or some instances, even 100% if you could take some money now. So I'll give you a small down payment so you can get on to your next location. And then I'll just give you monthly payments for a set period of time.
So you give them, example being, you give them whatever, $70,000 now,
Yeah.
so they can get on their feet,
Sometimes
have a
it's
down
zero.
payment.
Sometimes it's no money down at all. Like they
Okay.
might just be in a situation like, just get this off my back, right? Just take it. And that happens. But it's typically not what, I mean, if it's going to be 20% and a 7% interest rate, like what you get, like, well, I just go to the bank and do that. There's no benefit for me here. But
Right.
if I can give them close to market value, which no one else will offer them, so we'll say that $400,000 house, say, if they put it on the market, they wouldn't get over 300 because it needs all this work. But what if I gave you 350 or 375, which is more than anyone else will give you, but you're just going to have to take it over a longer period of time. And so that's a good solution for a lot of people.
Huh. That is cool. So you'll end up fixing it, selling it, getting your 400, and you can distribute it to them. They're 350, 375.
Yeah.
So you're
So
not
what?
having to come up with 400
Yeah.
or
So what I
350, whatever.
there's a lot of different ways. Like in many instances, I try to hold on to everything. I don't like to flip properties. I want to hold them all. So I'll arrange payments so that I can rent out the property and it will still allow me to have a little bit left over each month. So it cash flows. So the property pays for itself. The other way I could do it is, if I say I paid 350 for the $400,000 house and I'm making payments to them over 30 years, I can now, once it's all done and fixed, I can go sell it to someone else for 400, 425 and take payments over 30 years from them just at a higher rate and create this arbitrage, this spread.
Gotcha. So
So
they're
that
paying you 2 grand, you're paying them 1,500. You get the $500 every month difference, whatever.
exactly. And I don't have to deal with toilets. I don't have to deal with termites and all that stuff.
Sure.
Yep.
Oh, I like that. That's clever.
Yeah.
Tell
So
me,
there's a
as
bunch of
far as the
different ones.
single
Those are,
family stuff,
mm-hmm.
dealing with tenants and all that kind of stuff, when you got a single family here, there, everywhere, are you the one painting and unclogging toilets, or do you have
No,
a
no.
management company or something like that? Tell me about
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So we hire property managers, and those are pretty much how we choose our markets also. It's wherever the best property management relationships we have.
Okay.
The real estate is, contrary to popular belief, real estate is pretty darn safe. I mean, with just a basic education, it's pretty difficult to mess it up. Where the risk comes into play are the people that you work with, right? So it's basically either, most people lose their money either with a bad contractor or a bad property manager.
Mm.
So we do as much due diligence on the people that we work with as we do the real estate itself, and sometimes even more. So the property management is really the secret to the whole thing. It's not finding good deals. It's not finding great houses. It's, can you get somebody to get that house to perform so it actually is an investment and it pays you more than it costs you to own it. So yeah, we have a really good system. We find property managers, and then we have a great system for managing property managers.
All
So
right.
yeah.
So you mentioned you're in California. You
I'm in
mentioned
Las
you just
Vegas.
recently had a transaction in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yep.
So you're whatever, three-quarters of the way across the country.
Yep.
How do you find a property manager that far away and know that they're good or figure out that they're good?
Here's another thing I wish they would have taught us in high school is that if you weren't born into a rich family or a rich network, Did you know you could buy your way in? They have these things called mastermind groups. And I've belonged to a number of those. I pay about 100 grand a year in mastermind groups just because of the network. And you build these relationships across the country of like-minded people that who also have means, and some of these are very expensive, 25, $50,000 a year to join this group, but you're in there with in a group with 50 people that also spent 50 grand. So you're in with a really, regardless of what the service offers, just you get to meet 50 people just like you. And so you create some amazing relationships, and real estate being such a people business, it's an invaluable experience, and it's a really good investment, and it helps our operation run.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So then let's go with your wife, what she's got going on
Mm-hmm.
with the investor piece, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit. Let's just delve into the foundation of what she has going on, then we can dig
Sure.
deeper.
So yeah, I'm the one that goes out and teaches people how to do what I do, right? So I just kind of gave you a little strategy, and if you were my client, I would hold your hand and we'd go through that whole process together until you're comfortable doing it on your own. So there's that type of person that wants to be hands-on and wants to do it themselves. What my wife does is she deals more with the busy professional that knows that they want real estate. They need real estate somewhere in their financial plan, but they don't have the time or the desire to go out and do all of that work. They don't want to do all that heavy lifting. So they'll come to her, and then she'll go out. She'll find the property for them. She'll fix it up. She'll put a tenant in place, and then she'll arrange the property management, and she'll just hand it over to them. She'll even arrange the financing, hand it over to them on a silver platter as a cash producing asset. And so that's what she does. It's called turnkey real estate investing is the phrase for it, or the name for it in our industry. So that's what she does. She runs that, and she runs that in 10 different markets, 9 or 10 different markets across the country.
Oh, wow.
So we
Okay.
have our relationships, we have our realtors there, we have our contractors there, we have our property managers there in all of those different markets. And so that's what she runs.
All right. And so when an investor comes to your wife, let's say, does she say we need an investment of X, or do they say I have an investment of X and she finds something to fit that?
It really starts with their goals, what they want to accomplish, right? And then we look at their resources of what they have available and how much of those goals, or what we create a roadmap on how we're going to reach that goal.
Okay.
If someone just says they want a cash flowing house, then that's really simple. That's really easy. But if someone comes in and says, "Hey, I want to leave my job in the next 24 months, and I want to do it with passive income, replacing my job's income," then that takes a much more involved plan and strategy. And so, and then there's everything in between.
Gotcha. In the majority of the investments that she's working with, are they single family houses as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. Can you give me a range, low and high investment? Because I imagine there's got to be a threshold on
Yeah.
the
So
floor.
if you go across the country, I mean, you don't want to buy a property unless it's going to pay you more than it costs you, right? You want the income from the property to pay you more than whatever the debt is or the expenses are. So that little formula, the sweet spot right now in the United States, and there's some variables depending which market you're in, but pretty much between, say, $75,000 and $175,000 is the price point of a house.
Okay.
And once you get above 200, 225, then they start, or that cash flow formula starts to break. And so all of a sudden the rent isn't keeping up with the value or the price of the house. So that's kind of the sweet spot between 100 and 200 right now is probably where you're at.
Okay.
So that's a lot in the Midwest, a lot in the South. Not a whole lot available on the coasts that
Sure.
it's that number.
Yeah, I guess even where I'm at, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin,
Hmm.
and I look at property around here and it's just like I don't understand how people are making it
Hmm.
from an investment point of view. But
Hmm.
you go hour outside,
Hmm.
and then you're like, okay. Now
Yeah, so
things start to make
well,
sense.
that we were talking about just before we started recording, I think. The property I just sold in Milwaukee, and that's only, I think, 2 or 3 miles from the baseball stadium.
Oh, nice.
And the house was 175,000
Yeah,
bucks.
Milwaukee is a very interesting market because I look at that and the stuff is half price there compared to Madison, and I
Hmm.
don't have any understanding as to
Hmm.
why. It's a bigger
Yeah, me.
town, they have more amenities,
Hmm.
blah blah blah.
I've never even been there, so I don't know either. But I just know the numbers. It was 175. It rented for I think 1,800 bucks a month. But
Oh,
we
you're
had
right
it
there.
as a short-term rental, so it brought in about $4,000 a month. And so that was a good property for us.
Nice.
And that worked. Yep. And that didn't take like that wasn't a strike of luck or a stroke of luck for us to find something like that. Those are pretty much
Yeah.
available everywhere in the United States.
All right.
Hmm.
Tell me, do you mind if we dig into taxes a little bit
Sure. I'll
from
do
the
my
real estate
best.
side? I just
Yeah.
had my first segmented depreciation report
Uh-huh.
done, all that jazz. I didn't even know that was a thing until last year.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the tax advantages of investing in real estate.
Sure. Well, real estate is probably the most tax preferred asset class that's available to just average people, right? So, first of all, if you own an income property, this is the biggest tax advantage that everyone should embrace, and whether it's a real estate owner or not, but the real estate thing kind of kills two birds with one stone, is that when you own an income property, you are, in the IRS's eyes, a business owner. So now you just get a whole slew of tax deductions, like your cell phone, right? And your mileage and office supplies and whatever else you happen to buy at Office Max or Staples. And then you've got your home office deduction. So the business thing is a really big deal because, as an employee, you are paid, they take your taxes out and you get to keep what's left. As a business owner, you're paid, you get to spend it all, and then they only tax what's left. And at the bottom line is that's a very, very different bottom line. So that's the first thing how real estate really benefits you tax wise is you are a business owner. So now you are taxed everywhere like a business owner. So that's huge. Then the second one would be the depreciation that you're talking about. That is one of the four ROI quadrants or the profit centers of real estate that most people just totally dismiss. And that's about a 3 or 4% return every single year that you are owning that piece of real estate. But people don't see it as a return because it's not money coming into their pocket. It's just money that's not being taken out of their pocket. With just that alone, those two things, being a business owner and the depreciation, most people, I mean, you take the person in the median income, which I don't know, 50, 60 grand a year, I think is the median household income, I think. Uh, 3, 4 rental properties can virtually eliminate your tax liability altogether for that person. And for that alone, I mean, real estate is worth owning if it's going to go ahead and just kind of zap out your whole tax liability legally, honestly, ethically, morally, with Uncle Sam's blessing. It says it right there in the tax code. Here, you do this, and we'll give you this benefit. You know, so I mean, there's no other asset class out there that provides that to you.
Yeah, what is the quote that I heard recently? It was something like, if you owe money in taxes, that just means you don't own enough real estate or something like that.
I've never heard of that, but yeah, for sure. And so here's a great example is that, we've owned up to 350 units before. We're down,
Wow.
we've really consolidated quite a bit since then. But we had so many tax deductions that we couldn't use them all. So they just kept on carrying forward. And this is how someone like a Donald Trump gets a tax bill and he paid $700 that year for taxes. Well, you're a billionaire. How'd you do this? Like, because of real estate. Real estate gives that to you. So on a much smaller scale, obviously, we had all of these tax deductions that we were carrying forward, and our accountant came to us and said, you know what? You're never ever going to be able to claim all of these. So let's kind of restructure your whole portfolio so that you can. So that's when we started selling our properties, but we'd sell them with seller financing. So we became the bank on those. Now, those are taxed entirely differently. So the money that we receive from income from rentals is taxed as passive income, residual income, right? The money that we receive from selling our property by being the bank, that's taxed as active income. It's taxed at a much higher rate.
Oh, that is active. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so what we did is we kind of just did this disbursement. He did this whole analysis on our portfolio. He says, okay, let's take your worst performing properties from a management side. And let's get those out. Let's get that headache out of here. And we're just going to sell those, but sell them with seller financing. So we continue to get the passive income from them, but we don't have the management headaches on those properties. And so we did just enough to where they canceled each other out. And now we were able to start recouping all of our tax deferrals that we had had from previous years. So we took that, applied that to the higher tax rate of the seller finance properties. You following along?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
cool. All right.
Yeah.
And so now we just kind of every couple of years we'll do a balance like, okay, where are we at? So we don't have to pay more taxes than necessary, but we can still maximize our passive income.
Nice. So when you
Mhm.
sell these properties, are they properties that you've had for a while where you don't have to deal with the depreciation, just paying it
Yeah.
back, something like that?
Yeah, yeah. There's different structures of how you can do that and kind of defer that and continue to kick that can down the road. It's a little bit beyond my knowledge base. I'll probably mess it up if I explain it. But yeah, all of that's taken into account.
Okay.
Yep,
Very cool. I imagine that's having the right team, professional
totally,
team accountants and
totally.
real estate attorneys, things like that, that know
Hmm.
what they're doing and have experience with it to help
Yeah,
you.
but we don't have any like highfalutin people. I mean, they're just they're available and accessible to the average person for sure. So it doesn't
Yeah, I imagine.
total expert.
So I guess I just got a new accountant because my other accountant just did, he was a typical W-2 guy.
Mhm.
And I had the business stuff to him. And I think it was just getting to the point where he just didn't know.
Yeah, yeah, outgrow him for
It
sure.
was just outside of the scope of what he was a push him in, shove him out kind of guy.
Hmm.
And like he was recommended. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. He says accountant on his door, so it must mean that he knows
Right,
things.
right. Well, it's really remarkable because I mean, you just get TurboTax, and you go in and you can punch in all the real estate stuff, and the TurboTax will figure out a bunch of stuff for you. And it's funny how many CPAs out there that don't even have that awareness.
It is bizarre. It
Yeah.
is definitely bizarre. I look back at what I'm gonna call them mistakes that my accountants have made over the years.
Hmm.
Then I only know of now, right? I wasn't smart enough to tell them 15 years ago, or even to look up online, like, is this a thing?
Right.
And then you think, like, how much did I spend? How much did I pay in taxes that I didn't need to?
Hmm.
I'm like, ugh, it pays to get someone that knows what they're doing. But on the flip side, you don't necessarily know that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
The
True.
accountants that I worked with before, it's not like they said, like, hey, I know 60% of what you need or anything.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like you've learned something since though.
Yeah. Yeah, that was as the tax bills get higher, you
Hmm.
get more, I guess in my case, I just started doing homework on my own and reaching out to other business owners saying, who do you use? What do they do?
Hmm.
And a lot of the people that I would talk to, business owners, would say, don't use my guy.
Yeah.
He's not that good.
Right.
It was
Right.
almost comical how many people, I guess when you compare the people that are just like, this is the one you need to talk to versus I've
Hmm.
been using my guy for years, don't use him. Yeah. Kind
Yeah,
of thing.
it's funny. Yeah, I mean, from my students, I get that request constantly. Do you know a good CPA? Do you know a good bookkeeper? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, my guy's good, but he might be a little overkill for you right now, and you don't want to use anyone else that I know.
Sure.
So, yep,
Fair.
similar.
Fair. So Matt, how can people find you?
Well, I've got the longest running real estate investing podcast on the interwebs. We started in
You really?
2009. Yeah, started in 2009. So if you like podcasts, you can go to the Epic Real Estate Investing podcast. If you go to epicrealestateinvesting.com, it takes you right to the iTunes link. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Now, you said 2009.
Hmm.
I so we've been going since 2017, and I get told that I was on the cusp of podcastdom.
Yeah.
But 2009, my gosh,
Yeah. I had to explain to people what a podcast was at the time.
that is incredible. How did you know? I'm just trying to think what the internet was in 2009. Because we're
Well,
talking when the Razor
iTunes
phone
was
was a
in
big deal,
its
right?
relative infancy, and I had stumbled upon the book, The 4 Hour Work Week.
Yeah, great book.
And so I was listening to that via audio. I bought it on iTunes. And then I liked the book so much, I went and I searched, what else does Tim Ferriss have? Right. And then it came up with all these little episodes, I guess. I just thought there were other books, right? Other audiobooks. And so Tim Ferriss had a podcast at the time, and it said free next to it. I was like, well, I'll listen to these. And that was kind of like how I got introduced to a podcast that way. I was just looking for more stuff from the same author of an audiobook I just listened to.
Huh.
And then there they were. I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this.
That is cool. Because I'm just trying to think about even internet speed back then compared to what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now you can get 500 gig, no problem. But back then, I imagine 10 gig was a big deal.
Yeah, but I think I had a smartphone.
I'm
When did
2000.
iPhone come
It's
out?
so funny because people say 20 years ago, and I still think in my head, okay, 1995.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, no,
Yeah.
no, not quite that far. So that's just I don't know, it all blends
Yeah,
after a
iTunes
while.
came out in 2001 of January.
Okay.
So this was 2009. So it had been around already for 8 years.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I imagine it's still just finding the platform and the storage.
Yeah, the iPhone was released in 2007. So that's about, yeah, right on the money. So 2009.
All right.
iPhone was out, iTunes was out, good to go.
That's cool.
Yep.
That is impressive. So tell me again what the name of the podcast is.
Epic Real Estate Investing.
Epic Real Estate Investing. I love it.
Just add a
Well,
.com to that and it'll take you right to the iTunes.
nice. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, James. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. My name is James Cademan, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as Matt. Matt, tell me that website one more time. We're going to drill it into people's heads.
Sure. EpicRealEstateInvesting.com.
I love it. If you're listening to this on the web, if you could do us a huge favor, give it a big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with your entrepreneurial friends, especially those that may want to walk away from begging groceries and move on to real estate, or even if they want to know the history of the recording and producing business, because that was a cool story there. I love that. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.